Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the 97th episode of the Tundra Cast. Today, I got my fellow scouting buddy in Nick,
Hello.
and we're just going to be doing our first proper mock draft of the season. You can see the setup that we have here. We're only going to do the first round, and we have the breakaway scouting cumulative big board that me and Nick have created with our top players. And essentially, what we're going to do is 16 of the picks are going to be with me, and the other 16 are going to be with Nick. And we're based off of who has which team. We're going to kind of make picks based off of what we think the team will do, in addition to our personal big boards. And there is one caveat that we've kind of thrown in there, just to kind of mimic the randomness of the true NHL draft, where with one of our picks in the top 20, we have to take somebody that is really off the board for us. So someone that we have in the, mid or early second round, or even late second round, that we think has a shot of being taken in the first. And with that, I guess we'll get started. Anything to add, Nick?
No, I think you kind of explained it all there. But yeah, get started with the first pick there.
All right.
It
Yes.
should be a no-brainer.
Yeah, this one's a pretty easy one. I got San Jose. I think for this, it's pretty straightforward. He's been the number one guy pretty much all season long. It's got to be Macklin Celebrini out of Boston University. I mean, he's just so elite, man. He's he might win the Hobie Baker this year. I mean, he's probably been the most dominant, draft year eligible player to play in college, in recent memory. There's really not enough good things to say about the way he plays and just how effective he is. And I think for a team like San Jose, like, this is their dream scenario where they get a guy like Macklin Celebrini who can just be their 1C. And I think Ivan Demidov would have been a great pick here for them as well if they had stuck at pick 2, like they were for most of the season. But Celebrini is just a better all around player, and I it's tough to say can't miss prospects in this industry, just because there's no such thing as can't miss technically. But I think it's pretty safe for us to project Celebrini to be a can't miss prospect.
100%. I think like something that's really grown throughout the year is just his all-around game. Like, you kind of see it when he plays with BU. He's just kind of all over the ice, strips pucks away super easy. He's gonna be like a star, and not like an all-around star as well. Like, he can score like a point a game every year if he really wanted to, but I don't know if it'll be every single season, just because he prides so well on the defensive side of the game as well. I think it's really an underappreciated way, like, style of his game. Kind of like how we saw Lafreniere. We kind of knew about the offensive skill, but he can really turn it on physically when he needs to, and can play well defensively as well. At least he did in junior, before he was drafted. And that's kind of the same idea we have with Celebrini. He's just an all-around talent, and there's not enough good things to be said about him. I feel like we've kind of heard everything at this point, but yeah, he's just the bona fide number one guy. This is the Celebrini draft, and it's gonna stay like that until draft day. So
Yeah, I mean, 58 points in 34 games.
like he's the youngest player that I remember being in NCAA, like, in my lifetime. Like, I don't think I've ever seen anyone younger than him, and he's
For
just
sure.
dominating.
Yeah,
So
he's so good. Pick 2. I also have pick 2 is Chicago. This is where I've mentioned this with Nick back when San Jose still had pick 2, and I said this is the guy that they might go with at pick 2, which is like super off the board. Um, but I'm gonna do it here with Chicago because I think they have like a similar need in that aspect, and I'm going with Zane PAREKH of the Saginaw Spirit at pick 2. Um, Now he's my fifth ranked player in the class, and I think he's yours as well. And he's not even my top ranked defenseman, but I'm kind of taking this from a point of view of a team that took Connor Bedard last year. Lucas Reichel is a guy they're hoping will be good. Frank Nazar is a guy they drafted. Oliver Moore is a guy that's coming along. And I think at pick 2, if you're not getting Macklin Celebrini, who is that stud first line player that you can either put with Bedard or have a two-head monster with him on and Bedard on separate lines, I think that on a blue line that has Kevin Korchinski, but outside of that, really has a lot of more defensive minded players like Sam Rinzel, Ethan Del Mastro, not exactly really efficient puck movers. And you think of the dynamism that Zane Prek can bring just from his fluid skating, his puck skills, that hockey sense. A lot of his movements remind me a ton of Quinn Hughes, and I think if you can get that top pair offensive defenseman that so many Stanley Cup champion teams have, um, I think, at least to Chicago, that might be more valuable than a guy that we both have higher on the board, for example, in Ivan Demidov, right? Because they have a lot of really young, dynamic, potential top 6 forwards. Whereas I really think pairing Korchinski with Parekh could be super, super dangerous. And I really love the player too. So, I think that power play unit with him and Bedard could be just ridiculous.
No, it definitely makes sense, especially when you look at, like you mentioned, some of the players that are playing, like Alex Vlasic. He's still only 22, plays on the left side. You put Parekh on that right side one day, that could be something right there. I mean, you have your offensive dynamo and you have your defensive dynamo right there. So I could definitely see it. They're not very like particularly strong on the right side either to begin with. So um, we'll see what happens with like Seth Jones and how long he's going to be with the Blackhawks still. But I feel like he's just going to be the number one guy regardless. But Parekh eventually, I mean, defense would take a while to develop anyways. But for the most part, um, I think Parekh is definitely ahead of the game when it comes to his hockey sense. I think it's the biggest thing. When you look at some of the other OHL guys, and this is why it's a little hesitant to put him higher on my personal list, is that like we've seen so many like OHL offensive defensemen that have just not been much in the NHL, but Parekh really is different. He's a different kind of offensive defenseman. He's a lot smarter, a lot more developed than a lot of these defensemen were. And that really sets him apart. He's having a historic year with Saginaw this year. And I mean, I could definitely see it. I mean, they do have a ton of prospects at number 2. I don't know if I think Demidov is in Russia for like another year at the very most. There's always that kind of Russian factor there that some teams love, and teams love drafting by position as well. I've never been huge on it when you're drafting that high, but Parekh is definitely one of those can't miss prospects. If you're in a position like Chicago that need defensemen that badly, and especially on that right side, then I could totally see it.
For sure, for sure. I mean, Parex, I think him and Brzustovic are the two guys who have 90 plus points amongst defensemen. And I think they're like the first one since I can't remember the name, but it's been years since they've had a 19 and under defenseman have that many points.
It's been
And
a long
Parekh, who
time.
is draft eligible, is being able to produce at such a rate. Is just crazy. And again, those movement skills and that hockey sense. When I watch him play, I just get Quinn Hughes. Like there are some similarities there on those edges too, the way he skates. I really like Prek. Again, I agree. Not sure I'd have him. He's not second on my board. He's the
Yeah.
third defenseman on my board, in fact. But I really do like the player.
He's a second on mine, and like I think we talked about last time about him needing like the right system. Chicago might just be that right system. If you watch Saginaw play, it's very similar to when we get to Boyum at some point as well. It's very similar to how they play as well. But there's always someone covering for Parekh. They allow Parekh to do whatever he wants on the ice. If Chicago can do that for Parekh, he's gonna shine no problem. But if he struggles early, it might be a little bit weird for him to carry on Chicago. Well, I'll just have to see how it goes. I mean, that's just more of a fit, really. But um, I mean, yeah, it's about the same. It's about the right system for sure. But it could be with Chicago. I totally agree.
All right, pick 3. This is an interesting spot because for me,
Yeah,
it's always been down to 2 players, but we'll see where you go with this
I
one.
think we both have the same players in mind. Um, and when you look at Anaheim in the last few years, they like to draft size, and they're just kind of one of those teams that doesn't really, they don't really care about what the consensus is. They'll just draft whoever. Um, You look at that defense; they're very strong. The offense is really coming together as well. I'm gonna go Artem Levshinov here, and you mentioned this to me. Um, Realistically, he'll probably be the first defenseman gone in the draft. He's a lot farther on my board. I think he's ninth on my board. He's grown on me, but I'm still having some complications with him. I think it's going to take a little longer to develop than some other defensemen in this draft that are going to go around that area. When you look at Anaheim's defense, yes, they have guys like Luno and Minchikov and all these guys, Zellweger. I think Luno's the only righty. I think
Yep.
everyone else is a lefty, and Levshinov's a righty. I think what teams are going to love about him is he's a big defenseman. He's really good offensively, and he can really skate. And he's got a smart mind in the offensive zone. Um, I think when you have a guy like Levshinov in the future feeding pucks, I mean, that could be your Cam Fowler replacement. Fowler is a guy that's got a little bit of size to him, but he's got a lot of offensive skill as well. And Levshinov has that mind, that hockey sense that can really be a game breaker for the Anaheim Ducks in the back end. Um, you look at a few guys like Caden Lindstrom, who I thought might have been their pick here, but
Yep.
he's been injured. So I don't know how that's going to sway the Anaheim Ducks differently, or any team picking him around the top five for that matter, because he hasn't really played in a while. But Leshunov just feels like a good fit. I feel like on a team like the Ducks, he could probably play year one. That's kind of like, I feel like if he plays year one, he's going to get burned because I think he's got to do some work
Yeah.
off the puck. I feel like his decision making isn't great still. There's been a few games I've seen where he'll make the wrong read. He'll go to pinch and he'll completely miss it. And he doesn't have quite enough speed to get back in time. So there's been times where he gets away with it. There's times where he doesn't get away with it. But again, that's just kind of how Michigan State, they just kind of let him do whatever he wants. He's had a great season at Michigan State. He's a point a game. Um, he's lower on my board for kind of those reasons, but I mean, I could see it for the Anaheim Ducks. Like I said, you kind of put that in my mind a little bit, and it's hard to ignore now when you look at the other players on the board and how they've drafted in the past. I mean, he's still a real good player there. So,
Yeah, I think he's a really good fit if you're projecting the blue line going forward with, Zellweger, Mintyukov, and I'm forgetting, and Lacombe on the left, right? Those guys you aren't don't really have the physical presence and stature that a guy like Lev Shunov can have. Um, and I think he's a guy where his toolkit and kind of his projection is sky high, and I think that if his if his kind of his because on the processing and the hockey sense aspect, I think he's shown real flashes, but I have seen kind of he has been sometimes been prone to turnovers when he misses on a pinch or he doesn't close the gap and takes a risk and it doesn't work out. He tends to panic a little bit. He's not super poised when he's facing a ton of pressure. And I think those are things that he can definitely work on, which is why I agree. I think he could probably play first year if Anaheim takes him. I think he would struggle a decent bit, just given that he just needs a little bit more time to refine some of his processing and his decision making. And at the AHL level, it's tough to work on that when you've got some of the fastest and most physical players in the world, bearing down on you. But I think long term projection wise, I think he's a guy who can be a top pair defenseman. I think he can play penalty kill and power play. He's got the size for it, and I think he's a pretty good puck mover. When he's got things under control, and I think that could allow him to not just be kind of a defensive defenseman, but have that ability in transition to work with a guy like Zellweger or Mintyukov or whoever he ends up playing with, um, where he's not a negative, offensively. Where a lot of big guys that get taken in the draft defensively have had that issue where they're a bit of a black hole offensively and they're just there for their physical presence. I think with Shunov, and that's why he's going as high in the first round as he is a guy who can provide offense and defense. And, as long as he gets the processing together a bit, I think he can be really strong in transition as well. And he's a great skater, too. He covers
oh,
so
he's
much space.
fantastic, especially for a bigger defenseman. You kind of see those defensemen that are like 6'3", 6'4", that are kind of clunky, especially when they're growing. Like they have a bit of a growth spurt. It kind of takes them a while to get up to speed with their height. But Levchinov doesn't look like that type of player. He gets up ice really quick. He's always moving his feet. If you watch him play, he's constantly moving, trying to create space for himself. He's really good offensively, but there are those questions I have defensively about not being engaged enough and all the sorts. Columbus at number 4 is interesting because I feel like they just had a ton of picks up in this range. For me, they have a decent amount of defensive prospects. They just they're such a weird team. I feel like they just don't really know how to develop very well.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go with this pick. I'm gonna go Berkeley Catton from Spokane Chiefs. Another skilled forward they can add into that core. Kent Johnson can play wing. So I think if they put him on the wing and you have Fantilli there and you have Catton there, what I like about Catton is that he's playing on not the greatest team in Spokane. And when you watch him, he's responsible for a lot of the stuff that happens to Spokane, both offensively and defensively. Not the quickest skater, but he's highly skilled. He's very smart. He's able to get around players pretty easily. I think he's going to have a pretty seamless transition in the NHL. I don't know if I can say enough good things about Catton. I'm just a real big Catton fan. And I think it just makes sense, really, if you look down that middle core for the future for the Columbus Blue Jackets. They've always been kind of good with their wingers. They always seem to have some high-end wingers in their team, like Gavin Brindley they drafted last year pretty late. That was a really good pick.
Huge Brindley guy, by the way. That was
That
my
was a
boy
huge
last year.
pick. Yeah,
I
that
love
was huge.
Brindley.
And like their defense is coming along too. That was my PS4. I don't know what's going on there, but like David Juracek should be in the NHL more consistently.
Yeah.
He's on the right side, and they have Denton Matejchuk coming, who's probably going to be more of like an offensive guy on the blue line of the NHL. I'm not really in love with this defensive game still.
Carson Kuhlman's taking
Carson Kuhlman's, yeah. So they
He
have
could
some
be a
defense
guy.
coming. He could be a guy. I was definitely a bigger fan of him 2 years ago than I was now, but I mean, a guy like Berkeley Catton just kind of makes sense in terms of the fit and what they're looking for in that forward core. Kind of a guy that can score, that can pass, can get the pucks quickly. I mean, I feel like he's just a good fit for that team, for that organization.
Yeah, I mean, Catton's a guy that I really want to move higher on the board, and he's my 4th ranked forward, so he's like, but I think him and Lindstrom for me right now is like a hair's difference because I love both of them, but for different reasons, if that makes sense.
Oh, they're totally different players.
Yeah. And the only reason Catton's lower for me, I think he's at 7 versus 4 for you, is just because I have so many defensemen that I really like. Like, I really think those 3 defensemen I have ahead of him are just outstanding players. But I'm a huge Catton guy. I think, the more I watch him, like when I used to say he doesn't have like a really elite trait, but he's like he's got that quick twitch ability to him, if that makes sense. That ability to move from side to side. I think his shot is like super underrated. He's got real great ability to take defenders on 1v1 with that kind of side to side ability, as well as that hockey sense as a passer. So I think as a play driver, I really like him going forward, and as we've talked about throughout all of our mock draft videos, his ability to raise his level of game, how well he played for Canada at the Hlinka Gretzky Cup, how he's carrying a not so great Spokane Chiefs team this season and putting up gaudy offensive numbers. I really like it. I cannot lie, I am surprised that you went with him over a certain other player that I think with my pick, Kent Hughes and the Montreal Canadiens will be running up to the draft board to take. Because that's a hell of a steal at their spot. But I'm a huge fan of Berkeley Catton, and you know what? I don't hate that pick at all because he's such an incredible player.
That's the thing about like the after number 1 is that you can put those players in like any order, and I probably wouldn't mind it. Like, it's such a weird draft where you have like those like 4 or 5 guys, or like more than that. Like, you can go into the teens, that are just like all in the same group. So like it's kind of hard to differentiate like every player. So what you get like in the later rounds, there's just like so many of the same type of player. But yeah, I just feel like down the middle, they're just not very strong. Like, Sillinger's regressing already. Like, I'm not sure what's going on there. Again, Columbus are just like a weird team. They don't have Jarmo Kekalainen anymore either. I mean, we'll see what happens, but I think they're definitely a lot more strong in the wing right now. I think they're a lot stronger on defense moving forward. I feel like that center court needs a little bit of work, and I think Berkeley Catton's the guy. Especially if Columbus stay bad. I mean, Catton.
Hey, he knows with bad teams.
He knows how to play on a bad team. I mean, that's why I think he could definitely build that team up from where it is, and him and Fantilli as well. I mean, Fantilli's no joke. He's just been injured for most of the year, but um,
That's a
yeah,
scary top six. Yeah.
it is. Yeah.
The one thing with Columbus, I think part of the reason is like they're struggling is because they're bringing these guys into play so early on. Like Sillinger was the guy that I was kind of surprised because he was like the 11th pick and
Mm-hmm.
he made the team out of camp his draft year, right? I felt it was a little bit early for him. And then Fantilli obviously is playing in his draft year. Um, and I think Ken Johnson, I think he only I can't remember, but I think he was also a guy who he might have played 1 year at Michigan before after the draft before coming over, but I think he was also a guy that like came over directly to the AHL slash NHL and they kind of like take these guys and try to push them in right away up front as far as forwards go, and it hasn't always worked out.
No, and
Sillinger
I
and
think with
Johnson are both struggling quite a bit.
yeah, and I think with Ken Johnson's case is really weird. I think he's been out for a lot of the year, and again, Columbus is just so weird. I feel like they just don't really have a very good like development plan in place on that team, and a lot of them are struggling because of it. And maybe just they just don't draft well. I mean, they've had some really blunderish picks in the past like 20 years or so, but um, I was gonna make a point. Now I can't even remember. Oh yeah, I'd say like Ken Johnson was more developed at this stage, and Berkeley Catton was. He had that elite skating and that elite skill that Catton doesn't quite have the elite skating quite yet, but I think he'll get there. He's not like overly fast, so that's probably why they jumped him in right away. I think Catton plays one more year, and then we'll see what happens with him in Columbus. But I mean, I'm always a guy that likes to take time with my prospects, so Columbus has to do it
Yeah.
right. But this could be the right pick. We'll
Yeah,
see.
for sure. And here with the fifth overall pick in the 2024 NHL draft, the Montreal Canadiens are proud to select from SK 1946 St. Petersburg of the MHL, Ivan Demidov. He fell in our mock draft, and this has been a day one guy for me. I've had him at second overall since our first mock draft, and he is so sick with the puck. I don't think there's a player in this class that that embodies puck on a string. You know, NHL like 23, 24, the X Factor, puck on a string. There
Mm-hmm.
is no one that embodies that more than Demidov. He's so sick. You know, his ability to create space for himself, find teammates. You know, his ability to, and a lot of times, I think part of it is because of the league he plays in. Like he just by using his hands, he can just create dangerous opportunities in like the trapezoid for himself and for his teammates. I think you know some of that skill might not work at the KHL level or the NHL level. I think that he will have to adjust when he plays at a higher level of you know utilizing his edges, utilizing his hockey IQ and his sense and his passing to you know generate more space for himself against higher levels of competition when he has to play against them. Um, but I think from what we've seen, the passing is there, the hands are there, the skating from kind of a side to side perspective is there. He's not the fastest in a straight line, but he's my number two. He's your number two player in the class.
Mm-hmm.
I think Montreal Canadiens fans would be ecstatic with
Oh
Ivan
yeah,
Demidov here at pick five.
yeah. I feel like Columbus fans might hate me for passing on him, but anyways, I mean, I think you explained it all perfectly. Like Demidov is just a dirty player. He's awesome to watch. He's so much fun. He just dominates that junior league. I'm not sure why he's not in the KHL, but correct me if I'm wrong. Isn't this the same team that Matvey Mitchkov was on as well, and they loaned him, or is that a different team? It's like I can't remember, but
I think you're right.
um, yeah. So like maybe there's just that factor there, and they just keep him down there to dominate. I mean, maybe they just want to develop him. I'm not sure, but it'd be interesting to see what he does in the KHL. I've said all year long I wish he played a little more in the KHL, just kind of see what he can bring. He's just way too good for that MHL league, but I mean that's no detriment to his talent. Like he is one of the most talented players, if not the most skilled, talented player in this draft. He's got elite skill. Um, you can do it in all sorts of different ways. You can just like skate up the ice every. He could probably score like 10 points a game if he really wanted to. Like, it's insane how, especially in the league of the MHL, it's just kind of a crazy league at times. But um, yeah, I think him feeding the puck to Nick Suzuki and Cole Caulfield is just kind of a match made in heaven. Slavkovsky as well. I mean, go down the list. Like,
I mean,
That is
a
a
line of Slavkovsky, Demidov, and Caulfield.
yeah, just nasty, just nasty.
That's nasty. You got the power forward, playmaker, sniper with Demidov as the primary play driver. Oh god, that power play with Suzuki and then Lane Hudson on the back end. Gosh, that as a Leafs fan, I would not be happy if this is how the draft plays out, to say the least.
Yeah, for sure. All right, you have
Um,
Ottawa next.
Yes, Ottawa next. So this is a tough one because if I'm Ottawa, I do not love how this board played out with Parek and Levshunov going at 2 and 3. Because I think in a perfect world, they want a right D. They've got a lot of quality
Yeah,
lefty and a lot of lefty that they've paid. And so I think the best value here is one of our two lefty defensemen, but I don't think Ottawa goes for that. And I do think they tried to get that power forward a couple of years ago with Tyler Boucher, and it didn't really work out. This is a guy who is actually valued to be in the top 10. I think has a really enticing skill set. Has dealt with injury issues this year, as you can see with the red name. But I think Kane Lindstrom, I think he fits what um what Ottawa wants in their forwards. I think a lot of people have used the Tage Thompson comparison, Quinton Byfield comparison for him. I think that's true. He uses his frame pretty well already at his age to generate space for himself to get off that shot. He's a wonderful skater at his size. And when he played this year, he's been incredibly productive too. And I think he's he's his ability to position himself and protect the puck and his ability to just take those power plays to the net and create offense on his own. I think that's a future top six forward, and if all things go right, that's a future top line forward. So I think Ottawa here. I think they would have loved if Levshunov or Parek fell, but with how the board's fallen, I think a power forward to become what they were hoping Tyler Boucher was going to become, I think is a pretty good pick.
yeah. Again, Ottawa, kind of like Columbus, is just one of those weird teams that has all these players coming up and all these young prospects. And while the prospects work, the team just doesn't work. And you know, it might have not been a bad choice for a left-handed D even at this pick because you look at guys in like Shabbat, who's not as good as he was before. I mean, Jacob Chikrin's been in trade talks for forever. You have Jake Sanderson there, but I mean, even like Aziz Boyum could have been a real good fit for Ottawa there as well. You could like see him trade down, I guess, at this point if they really don't like the board, but you don't really see teams trade down from that area
That
anymore.
high, yeah.
Yeah, Kane Lindstrom's really a real good, well-rounded player when he does play. He skates really well for his size, like you said. He uses his body really well, and that's what I like about these big forwards is that they use that to their advantage. And Kane Lindstrom definitely does that. Because if you don't, you're just kind of another guy, and you know what I mean. Like,
Yeah.
um, there's guys that are small that use as much size as they can, and then there's guys that are big that use the size they can, and that's a huge advantage to them. So the game kind of comes easy for Lindstrom in that sense. He's able to strip pucks that way. He's able to create space that way. He's really tenacious around the net, around the boards as well. It's just a real strong player. So I think he's going to be a puck possession freak. I just think it's a very Byfield-esque learning, or not learning curve, but development curve right now.
For
I think it's
sure.
going to take a little bit for Lindstrom, but all the intangibles are there. He's still really raw, and he could end up being like a Quentin Byfield. I mean, I think he will be at some point. I think he's going to be a great player in the NHL if all things go right. And then especially with the injuries as well. I mean, maybe that's a bit of a concern. I don't think it's a huge concern with me. It's enough to maybe drop him on my list a little bit, and maybe enough for a team like Anaheim or Columbus that's selecting that high to maybe go with a safer option. But if you want to consider Cat a safer option, but Lindstrom's definitely a guy I could see playing for Ottawa, just to go along with their other, young forwards. But you're
Yeah.
definitely right about the Boucher comparison as well. That's how that Boucher pick. I still look at it and I'm like, oh my goodness. But yeah, that's no, I think that'd be a solid pick for Ottawa for sure. I feel like if they are in the stage, yeah, you get the right D and Parek and Levshinov gone, but I think there's still some value with either a Dickinson or a Boyum there as well. I think it's something I should at least consider because if you're looking at your defense and you're looking at your team in the next 3 or 4 years when they're You know, maybe Dickinson comes in a little earlier than that, but like when they're fully developed, like what's your team going to look like? I feel like Ottawa's window, when you look at guys like Brandstrom and again Chabot and all those guys, they're getting older. Like they're not getting any younger. Like Batherson's going to be 25. Um, Brandstrom's 24, hasn't really quite been the player that he was supposed to be. Like I wonder how long it's going to be until Ottawa just starts offloading guys. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
Lindstrom could be that building block for the future. So
Yeah,
I
because
wouldn't
my,
mind that at
my
all.
my my mindset is kind of just, um, I think they with Shabbat, I think he's under contract for like another 3 years. Chitrin is a
Yeah,
guy that they said they really want to extend, and Sanderson's obviously on that huge 8 year deal. And in my mind, they're gonna move one of Shabbat or Chitrin. I'm sure of it. But that's basically that means that two of your top four lefty are basically gonna be taken up for the next 6 7 years. Like whichever one of Shabbat or Chikrin you keep, like that guy is gonna get paid. He's gonna get term. He's probably gonna get a no move clause. And Sanderson's already on that 8 year, right?
true.
And I think if you're Ottawa, you really are tempted by Dickinson or Boyum. But if Lindstrom can come in 2 to 3 years, and like Byfield came into the NHL right away, right? He wasn't
Yeah,
super great, but he was playing NHL games pretty early on. And I think they might view Lindstrom in a similar manner, where this is a guy who can play on our third line for a year or two, like pretty early on, and be relatively productive, and then climb with the rest of the team as they push towards playoff contention. I think for me at least, I think Lindstrom probably has a higher chance of playing for Ottawa next year than a Dickinson or Boyum, just because of how the roster is constructed. Um, there's only three lefty, but Lindstrom can play anywhere, as a forward, right? So that's kind of where I'm coming from, but definitely, how much I love Boyum. He's my number three
oh,
player in the
he's great.
draft. Like I would totally be okay with them taking either of the lefties here as well. I just opted for I think it's still a pretty great player at 6.
No, 100%.
I've got a couple picks here in a row. I got the next two picks are also mine.
Mm-hmm.
And with Arizona, I know I'm just like playing like kind of like a hot shot, like hot takes out here, but I think this really fits kind of what they've been doing recently, and the fall of those two top lefties continue. But I think they took Daniel Boo last year. They took Dmitry Simishev. It looks like they're kind of taking the big power forward route with Connor Geeky and Josh Doan as well. And I think that this is a position where clearly Arizona doesn't really buy into production, because Daniel
Yeah,
Boo did not have the most productive draft year, and neither did Simishev, right? So I think in this world, this is one where they really value traits, and Igor Chernyshov's tape for me whenever I've watched him has been really, really impressive. It's why he's my, I think, 16th ranked player. Um, but he's very translatable. He's got a very translatable NHL skill set. He's got pretty good skating. He's a very good straight line skater. He's got good size. He drives to the net really well. He's not afraid to use his size. He plays really heavy. And he's done well in the MHL, even though the KHL production hasn't been there. But I think he's been a little bit unlucky. I think he's really driven play positively when he has played for Dynamo Moscow in the KHL. And he has some good raw passing ability, but some of his hockey sense has to come along. But I think that Arizona is a team that really values traits, which is why I also considered Anton Silayev here for them out of the Russian league as well. But I've opted with Chernishev. He's a guy that's been rising on my board. I do like him a lot, and I think he fits the kind of team that Arizona is trying to build.
100%. And I think the common choice here would be to take Silayev here because I think everybody in their dog has Silayev projected to go to the Coyotes for exactly that reason. They don't kind of like the Anaheim Ducks. They don't care about anyone else's list. They don't care about consensus. They'll just take whoever they like. Connor Geeky, Barrett Hayton is a big one. The only one I can remember that was like on script was 2016 when they took Clayton Keller and Jacob Chikrin. Like that
I
was
think
on script, but
I
like
think Genther was relatively on script too. I think at least it
sure,
was like reasonable value. I think Genther was probably expected to go around where they took him.
that's fair. But especially when you look at the last, even like last year, last couple of years, they've taken some off the wall picks, and I didn't like
Oh
the
yeah.
Simashev and Boo picks at the time, but they're trying to build an identity. They're trying to be a big team that can score, that can really shut down guys. I thought Silyev would for sure be. I mean, Silyev makes sense in my mind just because. Yeah, I mean, Selyev's also just a big wild card. I mean, if you want to go for the safer option at Chernyshев, then you can. But like, I'm still not very comfortable with Selyev in that spot. Chernyshev's definitely off the board, but I could see it. I mean, a lot of their younger forwards that are there. I mean, Logan Cooley, that's there. Dylan Gunther, like you mentioned as well. Two guys that can play, make, and score.
Peyton
You kind of get that power forward there as well. That's a pretty good line, power play line. Um, depending how you look at it. But
Doan's been
I think
playing really well in the AHL this year
yeah,
too.
don't hasn't been bad either, which is kind of surprising. I thought they were just kind of picking the guy because he was
Yeah,
the guy's
same.
son, but they have some young defense coming. Um, but I don't think it's quite there. I mean, there are a lot of defensemen in this draft. You could absolutely, if you have a boatload of picks, you could absolutely take a forward here and then just bank on a defenseman later on in the draft. Like, if you need a defensive defenseman that bad, like a Charlie Illick or Thomas Lavoie or like something like that, if you're really banking on it. So I could see it for sure if you're in the Arizona's situation. And Chernyshov just makes the most sense based on what they drafted last. So I could
It's a
see it.
really off the board pick, and I'm not picking him at 7 because I think like that's where he should be picked. He's my
Yeah.
16th ranked player. I just, again, it's kind of predictive, and I'm trying to mimic the randomness a little bit of draft
The draft is
season.
the draft. It takes one guy. It takes one team to like a guy better than another guy, and that's when you start to see falls and all that stuff. So it's fun. That's what the draft's all about.
All right, this is my last pick before we go on a run of your picks because I think you have the next three after me. This is
Yeah.
where the defenseman slide stops, and I'm walking myself through the process here with Dickinson and Boyum. And I'm sorry, Nick. I
Oh
know
God.
Dickinson is your guy, but he is gonna keep falling. I love Zeev Boyum. He is he is by far he is definitely my number one player in the class in terms of defensemen. And he's just so dynamic. He takes chances, but he never takes them. He never puts himself in bad spots. Um, I think he's been the most historically productive for Denver this year in college. Um, and he's incredible under pressure. He's really composed. His in zone defensive play, as I mentioned, is really good. His retrievals are great. And I think his transitional ability is really good. I watched him at the World Juniors and I loved how he played. I think he was one of the US's better defensemen as a draft eligible. He was quarterback in their power play 2 unit. And there was that one play I think against Norway where he just straddled the line, made a beautiful pass the the, the grain of the defense straight to Will Smith's stick for a tap in. And he had earlier today or yesterday when Denver was playing. I think it was this St. Clouds.
Yes, I believe. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
The
he
overtime
had
winner.
just
Yeah.
two insane goals just jumping into the offense. His first goal was way nicer, but like that's just kind of a sneak peek into what kind of player Zeev Boehm can be. And I think with a team that has as many great forward prospects as they do, I think a defenseman here with the way it dropped is perfect for them. I think a future with Vince Dunn, Zeev Boyum, Jamie Alexiak, and Adam Larson as your top four. I think that's like Seattle has the pieces on that right side to have Boyum maybe play in the first 2 years after being drafted because I think they have that veteran presence to be able to take off some of to cover for Boyum. And not to even saying because I don't really think Boyum is as teammate dependent as a guy like Parekh is. I just want to make that clear, and that's why he's my number one defenseman on the board. The only reason Parek goes ahead of him is because of the shot. I think if Zeev Boyan was a righty, Chicago, I would have Chicago taking him at 2 instead. But Boyan is just, he thinks the game so well. He's really great offensively too, and I think it's a pretty perfect fit for what Seattle needs on the back end. Vince Dunn has been nice for them, but Boyan on that power play would be a difference maker.
I mean, dude, if Seattle ends up getting him, that's such a fun team to watch in the future. Like, they have one of the deepest, if not maybe the deepest prospect pool in the NHL. Like, they got my guys Goyette and Raykov, who I love, Yanni Neiman, who I've liked since day one as well,
Jagger Furcus.
Vegasivic, Jagger Furcus, who I know is your guy, Ty Nelson for me. Like Shala's been a bit of a weird case, but like just that alone, just based on like the just the prestige around the names is like ridiculous. And if they get Boyle, they're going to be such a fun team to watch. They're going to be zipping around the ice like crazy. And that Seattle defense is looking kind of old. I mean, that wouldn't be a bad pick for them at all. Even if you're just like picking him just based on how much you like him personally, like it's actually not a bad shout. Like they got Vince Dunn, who's just entering his prime 27, but Adam Larson, Jamie Alexiak are 31, Justin Schultz is 33, Dumoulin's 32. They've got defensive prospects coming, but that's an old decor, you know. So he had some youth in there, high skill, high offensive octane. Like he's so fun to watch, man. He is
I
so
love
fun.
Zeev Boyan, man.
He's so fun to watch. It's unreal how good he is. And like I was saying this earlier, he does all these like crazy little skill moves, and like he does them with a purpose though. Like everything he does
Oh
makes
yeah.
sense. You know, in his own zone, his transition game's phenomenal because you don't really know what he's gonna do. He protects the puck so well just because of how skilled he is. And that's a huge difference to a guy like that I've watched a lot, Antonio Stranges, who's one of my favorite players to ever wear a Knights uniform, but he has that high end skill, but he never used it in the right situation. There's a reason why Dale Hunter buried him in his draft year and he got drafted in the 4th round, right?
Right.
And Boyum is not that type of player at all. Like the skill he does is warranted. It's with a purpose. When you watch University of Denver playing, very similar to what I said about Parek and Saginaw, they got players all over there. So they're just zipping around, covering for each other. They're so quick. And Boyum fits that mold perfectly. So I think if this is Seattle's team for the future, especially Matty Beniers, who's already in the NHL and playing really well, then I think it's a no-brainer for them to take Boyum here. I mean, this is a real good piece threading on that defensive core for the future, which is something I think they need to build around for sure. So I could definitely see it. As for the 9th pick, now there's a few options they could take. There's a couple guys I'm thinking in mind, both from the OHL, but I I kind of for the same reason you're picking Boyle at Seattle. I got to take my boy Sam Dickinson. I have to. I mean, I could honestly see like a Liam Greentree here, and I wouldn't be upset with that at all. Um, the thing is with Dickinson, I don't see a more well-rounded defenseman or let alone like he's one of the top all-around players in the draft. Like he's so stable, he's so poised. Um, he's played a lot of games already with London and a lot of important ones. Um, he's just such a competitive kid. I love the way he plays. I love the way he kind of composes himself. Um, but he's also one of those players that like he's so hard to knock off the puck. He just has that long reach. He's positioned himself really well. His gap control is really good. And Pittsburgh need prospects. They did okay with the Jake Gensel trade. They got some forwards in, even if they weren't like the high end Canes prospects and whatever. Like I still not, you know, I'm not mad at that return. They just don't have a lot of defense. Like Owen Pickering is like their only defensive prospect I can think of, and I still don't like the guy. I think it was very animated when they
Yeah,
drafted
you
him.
were. I remember that.
I was not very happy at that pick, and I'm kind of still not. I think Sam Dickinson is a guy that is a lot more developed than a lot of the players that have gone before him so far on this board. Um, and I think realistically, this is probably where he goes in the draft. Because he doesn't have that wow factor like the the 3 defensemen that go ahead of him, right? But
Yeah.
he's just so stable everywhere. He's so dominant. Um, I really love the way he plays the game. Power play can be a specialist. Penalty kill he can be relied on. He's a bit of a daring defenseman when he wants to and when he needs to be. He'll dash up the ice, but he's good at it. He'll use his body. Um, yeah, he's just a really good defenseman. And I want to clarify as well. This whole time, I thought he was a right-handed defenseman. I could have sworn he was a right-handed. Turns out he's a left-handed. I'm like, does he just play both sides? Like, what's going on? But anyways, I
I
think
mean,
he'd be great for Pittsburgh.
yeah, I mean, he's as solid as it gets defensively, and that's a blue line that desperately needs some rejuvenation
Mm-hmm.
of youth. There's some old bodies on that team, and I think Sam Dickinson could play in the NHL next season and be better than Ryan Graves
Oh,
alongside
yeah.
Chris
He's had a
Letang.
horrible year. I mean, we'll see next year, but it's not looking good. It's not looking good at all.
um, but I will say this is a name that I'm surprised you didn't consider a little bit, considering how productive these two players from the past have been with Sidney Crosby, with Phil Kessel and Jake Gensel, who has now left. Um, I really think pick 9 with Pittsburgh would have been a real opportunity for Cole Eiserman.
I thought about it. I just, that's such a weird one because he's so good at what he does, putting pucks in the net, creating space for himself. And we'll get to him when we pick him a bit more detail. But I just really don't like his play on the puck. I think just Pittsburgh just needs to have a safe pick here and not like an Owen Pickering or a Sam Poulin or a guy that's just kind of like
Whatever.
a bit of a low ceiling type of player. I think it just needs someone that's going to be stable, that's going to be solid, and I 100% see that in Dickinson. It's probably because I've seen him more than like any other prospect in this draft, but also
I
I just
think
feel
he's.
very strongly about him.
I
I
agree. I
consider
think
that.
Dickinson's the most refined defensively out of the defensemen in this draft class. I think he's
I
by
would
far the best.
I would say for Pittsburgh's standpoint, I think the best forward to take in this option would be like Liam Greentree. Like I love the way he plays the game. I think he'd be good for Pittsburgh considering Gensel just left. I think they're kind of similar players. They're both very smart. They both put the puck in the net. Um, but Dickinson, I mean, you got to build from that back end. Then, like you said, that back end is just kind of terrible right now. So, and again, just get a steady player that's gonna play in the NHL. He's probably not gonna put up a ton of points, but he's gonna play a ton of minutes, and he's gonna be relied upon. He's gonna play in all situations. Um, that's a player that we need. We need a player to kind of rely on for the next, however long we're gonna be bad for, because it's not gonna be good. So, and if Pittsburgh does pick Dickinson, I will buy a Dickinson jersey like on the spot. Like that's what's gonna happen.
Oh yeah. Well, hopefully the draft falls the way it does in
Oh,
real life.
oh,
Because I
it
think
won't.
Dickinson
It
at
won't.
9 is a hell of a steal.
It is, but we'll see what happens. I want to have Buffalo's pick here as well. Again, Buffalo was just a freaking weird team. Like they have all these players, all these prospects that are just like so good, and they just can't figure it out. So like, I don't know if they trade down here. I don't know what they do. I mean, I guess just get another guy. Um, I'm just like looking on the list here, and I'm like, who would they take? I mean, Eiserman's there. You kind of have like a Jack Quinn. You're hoping that he becomes something, at this point. Yeah, Brenzak Nygaard. I'll probably just take Constant Hellenius. I mean, he's one of the smartest player, if not the smartest player in this draft. A guy that's produced really well already in his league and the Finnish Elite League. Um, kind of like Dickinson in the sense that he's not like super daring all the time, but he does drive the net really hard. He gets into good areas, high danger areas. He feeds the puck to a lot. Um, and I think he's one of the more NHL ready players in this draft. And it's just a chance for Buffalo to get younger, a bit more skilled. Um, I think realistically, if they have a chance to pick Berkeley Catton, they should do it because they just traded away Casey Middlestat. But I
They
think
do have Matt
Hellenius,
Savoy still, right?
yeah, and they also have Matt Savoy as well. So I forgot about that as well. They just have so many like random like good prospects. They just can't figure it out. Um, but yeah, I think Hellenius is one of the more ready players to play in the NHL apart from a guy like Celebrini. I think Celebrini 100% is going to be in the NHL next year. But a lot of these guys is kind of like a bit of a question mark. But Hellenius, I feel I would be okay with playing in the NHL next year. I don't know if he'll do great in the NHL next year, but because Liga is just such a different league than the NHL. But um, I guess any league's pretty different than the NHL. But um, yeah, I think in Buffalo's standpoint, I mean, what do you do? Like, do you draft by position? Because they don't really need a whole lot when you look at their prospects, but they just can't figure it out. So for me, I'll just take Constellanius. He's the highest on my board right now at this point, and um, guys like Brenzak Nygaard, the he'll play in the NHL for sure, but I think Hellenius is just kind of the better fit here for Buffalo at the end of the day, just based on what's going on in the draft right now. So
Yeah, I mean, hockey IQ is great. I think he's got a really good work rate. Um, and I think, there's questions about how much offense he's going to produce at the NHL level, but I think as a secondary player in a top nine role, and I only say top nine because, as you mentioned, how stacked Buffalo's prospect pool is, like that just might be where he ends up playing. But
and they have
I
Noah
think
Olsen too, who I love. Like,
I love
oh my
Olsen.
god,
I think I had Olsen like top 10 in his draft year.
I definitely had him top 10. I had him like behind like Karamaki. I had him like fifth in that year, I think. But
I had I had Oslin. Are you think of Ogren or Oslin? I think my comp for Oslin his draft year was Backstrom. Like
yeah,
just like a really great playmaker. Um, but I think they're pretty set down the middle. But I think just having a guy who can be a secondary player on the line who's got really great hockey IQ, makes the right play, pretty defense responsible defensively, can play up and down the lineup wherever you need him. I think that's more of what Buffalo needs right now because I think they've got a lot of guys who are great on the puck, who are great passers. I think they could use a couple more glue guys in their lineup. Like a lineup of, a line of three Austin Matthews types on paper, great, but at the same time, right? You like those kinds of players need a Zach Hyman, need a Michael Bunting. They need someone to do the dirty work, to get them the puck, to be in the right spot, to cover for them defensively. So I think Hellenius was a really great pick here.
yeah, for sure. And then third straight pick for me is a lot of talking. Jesus. I'm thinking defenseman here for sure. I think their forwards, they have a lot of them. They have a lot of young players as well. I mean, like Jack Hughes, Holtz is still there, though he hasn't really quite figured it out, Holtz, but he'll get there. I think I'm still a big believer in him. And like, Timo Meyer is finally starting to play well now that Lenny Ruff is out. So I think forwards, I think, are fine. Um, I'm gonna go Carter Yakimchuk here, and I'm gonna go with him because um, they have Luke Hughes and they have Simon Nemec, a righty and a lefty. That is a pretty good pairing if you want to put them together. Yakimchuk is another righty. He's big. He can score a lot. Um, he does remind me a little bit of Logan Mailloux. I did not like Logan Mailloux when he was drafted, and after he was drafted as well. But he's kind of figured it out, and he's been really good in the AHL. Yakimchuk's going to be a player that I think is going to take some time, but a lot of NHL teams I think are going to like that size, and they're going to like that ability to put the puck in the net and play that offensive game. His play, again, kind of like Levshinov, it needs work away from the puck. He needs to be more engaged defensively, but he's got size and he's got some skill. He's going to be bigger than Hughes and Nemec, I would think. I think he already is. I mean, he had some size, he had some skill there in that back end. There's some more skill in that back end there as well. I could totally see Silayev being this pick as well, just because he's another like big defenseman they can have. They drafted Muka Madula in the one year as well, which was like super
Yeah,
random,
they
and I
they
didn't
moved him
like
for
no.
Meyer though, so that was good
They
asset
did.
management.
They did. So, but I could totally like if they see Muka doing in their team one day. I mean, I could totally see them taking like a Silayev here as well. But I think Yakimchuk just has a little bit more skill to their liking. I think they kind of like they like their all around players. They like their size, and I think Yakimchuk kind of fits that mold. Even if I don't think he's the best defensively, I don't think he's the best in his own end. But he's got the ability. He's got the ability to kind of be a game changer in the offensive zone when he's on it. He's had some really good games recently for Calgary too. So, um, yeah, that's kind of my pick for that. But I could like you put Silayev and Yakimchuk in a hat, and I'd probably be okay with either one at this point. So,
Yeah, I mean, I think Yakimchuk, he's got some real confidence with the puck, like his ability to handle the puck and drive the net, which at times confuses me with him with a power forward. He does this, it's not often when you see a defenseman take the puck along the half boards and then drive it to the net for a shot. Um, I think he's got a real good, strong, strong shot. I think he could be better in zone, but I think his rush defense is hit or miss. I think he's not great at reading when to close the gap, when to maintain distance. But I think when he gets it right, the physical traits that you talked about really shine through. I think his skating is something that could use work, but I've realized throughout my time to not hold skating too much against players because it's something that can be developed. Is why I was really low on Connor Geeky his draft year, and he's kind of turned that around and kind of shown how, with an NHL staff and, development, you can become a better skater. So I think with that and just a more physical mindset defensively from a clearing the net perspective, I think Yakimchuk could be a really good second pair guy, for for New Jersey. So I don't hate that pick at all. All right, my pick. And I feel like this pressure almost, if that makes sense, to make the pick that everyone has in mind right now. And he's your 16th ranked player and my 18th ranked player. And right now it's really between, for me, him and the 6'7" Russian. Because this trade deadline, for some reason, has shown to me that Brett Conroy just loves Russian defensemen.
He must, and like
He,
big ones that can defend, like
yeah, right? Like,
you know what I mean? Like it's just like Well, I think he got Burstevich, which is like a really good get for them, but
yeah, I love that. But like every other acquisition was just a big hulking physical defensive defenseman.
yeah, they got what, Grushnikov, like holy cow.
Miramanov was the guy they got.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah.
so, but you know what? I think Calgary fans won't be upset at me for this. I think, just from a what's that word? Like a nostalgic, or like, just like a feelings based pick, a vibes
Yeah.
pick. Tija Ginla has been really good this year for Kelowna. I think he's got a great shot. I think he's a pretty good forechecker. I think he's got great NHL habits. Just, as a person, always being in the right positioning, always, knowing what timing, kind of his decision making and his entries. The entries, I will say, is one thing that I don't love. He likes controlled entries a lot, and I don't think the play driving and the puck handling is quite there to justify it. He turns over the puck a lot entering the offensive zone, but I don't think he's amazing defensively. But I think he's got what, almost 50 goals this year in the WHL.
Yeah, he's probably gonna hit 50 goals at some point this year.
I mean, he's been super productive. I think this is around the ceiling of where he could go. And I like the player. I think he projects to be a middle six guy in the NHL, and you know what? Just take him. Just take him. I don't hate it. I don't hate it. I probably would have gone Salayev in Heinz, but I might be talking myself out of this pick now. But you know what? Tija Ginla, his dad was a Flames legend. Let's just go with it.
His dad was a Stars legend. He was drafted by the Stars, not the Flames.
Oh, I didn't remember that.
He got traded for, I think, like Joe Nieuwendyk, I think, as like a prospect. And
I
then,
mean, that's a hell of a player to be traded for.
yeah.
Nieuwendyk is also amazing.
I think Craig Button was on the Dallas staff at that time too, so I don't know. There you go. But I like, again, I definitely agree with the controlled entries. I don't think it's quite translatable yet. The goal scoring is high end. I think we all kind of know that at this point. I still think the skating is a little bit of work. He's really good one-on-one. Again, it's just more about refining his game, just kind of being more ready for the NHL game. I think he's going to be a great junior scorer, but I think he's going to take a little bit of time to develop. I mentioned this last time. Like, his brother is already like super dynamic at his age. Like, I love his brother Joe.
Again,
he's unreal. And I don't think Tej is the same player. Like, I think they're kind of different players in that sense, but I don't think Tej was as dynamic as he was at the same age. So I think Joe's kind of already got a step ahead of him in that regard. But we'll see. I mean, this would be like an awesome pick for Flames fans, but is it the right pick at this stage? I mean, well, time will tell. But
time will tell. Time will tell.
Yeah, and then all right, let's go with 13 with the Islanders. There are a ton of names they could pick. Now, the Islanders are a weird team to project because they have like everybody locked up for like 6 years.
And they're all old too.
They're all old. Like, how do you project the Islanders? But I think this is when Cole Eiserman is, done slipping in the draft. I think this is where the buck stops, and I think the Islanders will take him. This is the same team that took Oliver Wahlstrom. Another, high end scoring winger out of the U.S. program. He scored tons of goals for them. Um, there's been a lot to be said about Eiserman. When I did my, I think it was what, January rankings, December rankings, I still had Eiserman number two because I didn't know who else to put there. I just kind of figured, oh, by default, Eiserman should be the number two guy. And there were a lot of questions asked about that. When you really zoom in on his game, um, yeah, he's got the goal scoring ability. He makes the game kind of easy for his line mates. He's able to get into space really easily. Um, and score goals that way. He's okay one on one. He can get by players one on one. It's just the play away from the puck. And I've seen some like other scouting reports and stuff trying to get a better idea of what they really see. And I think it was Hattie that I watched one of his videos, and he said he's like the worst defensive player he's ever tracked, which is like something. I don't think he's like that bad. I think he could definitely be a bit more engaged. I think if he plays for BU next year, I don't think they're going to let that slide very well, and I don't think he's going to be as productive as he probably wants to be if he's not going to be more engaged defensively and more engaged off the puck. With that being said, if it all works out and he develops well at BU, I mean, this is a dangerous scorer you're looking at, like at least a 30 goal scorer. But it just has to work out for Eiserman. It's not looking great right now. Guys that had that kind of same attribute, the goal scoring attribute, that's the hardest skill to learn in hockey is score tons of goals, right? And guys like Kaliev and Wallstrom, who I just mentioned, that was also drafted by the Islanders, haven't quite worked out yet. And who knows if Eiserman will? It's going to be a very weird pick, very wild card kind of player here. Only time will tell. But I think if a team is going to take him here, it's going to be Islanders because I don't know how to project them. I don't know what other needs they really have on that team in terms of prospects because I think they're kind of solid, but I think they like to kind of take whoever as well. So I think Eiserman's their guy. I don't know if it's the right pick, but I could definitely see him kind of slipping into this stage. But I mean, a lot of his concerns I heard about like Phil Kessel as well before he was
Right.
drafted, and he ended up just fine. So we'll see. We'll see what happens. It's a total boomer bust. It's no in between here. Like he's either going to be really good or just really bad. It's I don't know. I don't know. Just from what I've seen, but
Yeah.
it's
And you
it's
know
a
what?
weird player.
The Isles could use some scoring. That's a
They
team
could.
that has never really scored since
Yeah.
even the Barry Trotz years. And now Lambert's taken over, and they still can't score. Well, they can score, but they also like they score when they score, they give up goals, and then when they don't score, like they don't win either. Like when they do score, they give up too many goals, and then when they don't score, they can't win because they don't score. Cole Eiserman, I think is he's a good player. He's a polarizing player. He's got a great release in tight space. He's got a wicked shot. The rest of the game has to come together. And I think Minnesota would have been a place I would have taken him with Minnesota's pick if he didn't go to the Isles at 13, which puts me in a bit of a tough spot because I didn't think you were going to take Eiserman at 13.
I don't even know if Judd Brackett will take him though, because he's just like so good at what he does that like I don't know if he's going to see through that with Eisenman. I mean, I have to think that the Islanders pride themselves so well defensively that I have to think that they're going to have a big say on how Eisenman should play the game and try to develop him the proper
That's
way.
fair for
So
sure.
we'll see what happens with him. But the goal scoring 100% is there. And I don't think he's going to be much of a play driver in the NHL. It doesn't look like he's that at all right now.
Yeah,
He makes the game easy for his line mates, but he also is kind of a bit of a detriment sometimes because just of the way he plays off the puck. So
he's a pretty
it's very
one-dimensional
polarizing.
player.
Yeah, and these types of players in the drafts are either boom or bust. That's just how it goes. Like Jacob Chikrin was the number two guy for a lot of the year, and then he just kind of started falling and falling, and people kind of asking questions about his, is he regressing already? Is this kind of the height of Jacob Chikrin? And Arizona jumped up to take him, and they hit a really good player there. Guys like Angelo Esposito, who was hunted to be the number one overall pick, and then Pittsburgh got him, and he didn't really turn out to be really anything at all. Like he was playing in Italy at one point, and like um, he's just one of those players. He's one of those players that's either going to work out and you're going to kick yourselves for thinking he's a bad player, or it's going to be a bust and everyone's going to be like, "Told you so." So it's really weird with him, but he could go anywhere in this draft. Seriously, like a team's either going to love him for his goal scoring, or they're going to hate him because of his defense and he's going to slip. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, for sure. Here with Minnesota, I mean, Minnesota's had such a great track record with the
Mm-hmm.
drafting. Liam Ogren is incredible. Hustadinov is just making his debut. Brock Faber, who they traded for, but still their scouting staff clearly had some say in that. They've just had so many. Marco Rossi, great player. They've drafted so well. But they did take Charlie Stramel last year, who was a bit of a miss. Hasn't really been great for them this season. Hasn't been really been great this year in college. Um, and like I don't know if this is. I'm deciding between three players right now for them. Um, and I think I'm gonna take the one that I think probably has the most NHL translatable skill set with balance with upside, but without the off ice concerns. Um, and I think they're gonna go Liam Greentree.
Oh,
Um,
that'd be such a good pick if
I
they took
really
him there.
like him as a player, and he's a guy that I want to find a way to move up on my draft board. But super versatile, super translatable game. Um, he's grown exponentially as a passer this year on a not great team. He's his puck feel, his hockey sense just seems so much better than it was at the start of the year. And again, like I know the skating is not quite there, and that's why I kind of punished him early on in the process. But I've come around on that idea because I think that is something that you can grow on, and I think with Minnesota and the way that they can develop talent, I think this is a guy who can fix up that skating. I think his work rate on the puck is great, off the puck is great. I think he's got pretty good defensive awareness, and I think he's gonna be a top six player one day. And I mean, I think this is just really great value here at 14. I think he's a pretty complete player.
Yeah, he does remind me a lot of Wyatt Johnson when he was on Windsor as well. Like he's so smart. Skating might need a little bit of work. I don't think it's really half bad, to be honest. He's able to kind of move around well enough for his size and the type of player he is. Um, really smart offensively. Prides himself defensively as well. He's no slouch in that area either. Just a really well-rounded winger and playing on a pretty awful team in Windsor that are just like so up and down. He's also the captain of that team. He was named captain at like 17. He's got some leadership qualities there as well. I think this would be a really good pick for Minnesota, and I wouldn't put it past him. I think this would be a great pick. So
I think I got the choice pick before we go to you for St. Louis. And I'm not gonna lie, this is a guy I've had penciled to them the moment I
yeah,
saw this was the range that they were picking in. I think MBN is just such a Red Wings pick with the way how they've drafted the past couple of years. Nate Danielson, ninth overall. They took Marco Casper the year before. You know, Nygaard has just got a pretty translatable game to the NHL level, I think. I don't think his ceiling is super high, but I think he's gonna be a good penalty killer. I think he's really good on the boards, really good on the forecheck. Um, he's got good defensive habits playing with Mora IK and the Allsvenska. He's got great puck protection, great support player. I think he's probably a third middle six guy, but I think he's got a really strong shot. I think there's power play potential there because of his shooting, and I liked his showing for Norway at the World Juniors. And this just feels like a Detroit Red Wings pick, given how they picked in the last couple of years at forward.
yeah, and I very much see this with Eiserman as well. I think it's either him or Salayev at this point. He loves his big defensemen and he loves his European players. He took Marco Casper fairly high in his draft year as well. Um, and he brings those elements in the game that are already NHL ready or projectable. His all around game is really good. The shooting is up there as well, and you're right, he does have that sort of power play future potentially. So um, yeah, I feel like I've had him penciled in like pretty much all year as the guy to go to Detroit. Um, and yeah, he could definitely sneak into the top 10. I think I had him in the top 10 at one point in this year. Um, but I could definitely see it for sure. And he's already playing professionally. He's been playing in the playoffs, I think, now as well. And he's been playing well there. So
Yeah.
I could definitely see it for sure. I mean, if a team likes him enough, even higher than 15, I wouldn't be mad at that at all. I mean, I think he's very projectable at that stage. So
Yeah. I also think there is a chance that maybe there's more to his game that he hasn't shown because he's playing in a professional men's league. Maybe we see a world where, like Dalibor Dvorsky, like he somehow goes and plays in the junior league where he's able to, show off more of his offensive capabilities, and we just see a production spike because the Dvorsky pick looks a lot better now than it did at the time, just from like a production perspective. But we can't say that until we've seen it, and I haven't really seen that from MBN yet. But I just really love his floor, and that's why I think I have him pretty high relative to some other boards out there. I really like the player.
yeah, he's going to be an NHL player, I think, regardless. Um, Probably going to be a really good middle six guy, at least is what I project him. I don't think he'll be a first line winger, but middle six is like a good projectable spot for him. All right, so I got like four picks in a row here. I just kind of like took a look at my list here again. So 16 with St. Louis. Um, I think I take a defenseman here. I think it's going to be Serleyev. I'll just get him off the board and I'll talk about him. They don't have a lot of defensemen in their core. They have a lot of young forwards, and they've traded for a lot of young forwards. They've really dined out in that aspect. So it's kind of time to draft some defensemen here. And Serleyev is I guess, your best available at this point. Um, Now, from what I've seen, it looks like teams are going to take him like closer to the top five, which I don't think I'm even comfortable putting this guy in the top 10. He's got a lot to work on. I'll start with the positives though. Like 6'7", he's obviously really big. He uses that size pretty well in the KHL, and he's played a lot of minutes in the KHL, so he's kind of had, he's been able to kind of show that off a bit, and he skates really well for his size as well. For a 6'7", you wouldn't expect him to skate as well as he does. I think people are kind of putting him as the next Zdeno Chara. He's not going to be Zdeno Chara. He's not going to be as dominant as he was in both ends of the ice. Um, Silev has a lot of work to do in terms of his decision making and his overall composure. I feel like there's
For
times
sure.
where he just kind of gets rubbed out really easily along the boards. His transition game isn't great. He gets the puck away really quickly, which can be an asset, but it can also be a bit of a detriment. You just have to kind of make the right play if you're going to play it that quick. And a lot of times it isn't the right play. Um, he's got a real hard shot. He's got some good offensive qualities to his game there as well. I just think he's going to be projecting more as like a bit of a shutdown guy. But it's hard to project him that way when he doesn't have a ton of like, real good attributes in his defensive zone. Like he uses his size well, like I mentioned, and he can hit. But this gap control is not terrible either, although it could use some work. There's been times where he's kind of just left his man out in the dust. So um, he's a guy that needs work, and I think a lot more work than what NHL teams are prepared for, at least in my opinion. So I think if you take him as high, I think Bob McKenzie had him like what, second overall. Like I think if a team takes him that high, I think they're going to be real disappointed. But again, that's just my opinion. For St. Louis, though, they kind of need to play like this. They need to kind of dine out in the defense again, kind of for the same reason why I took Yakimchuk with who was it? I took a
New
defenseman
Jersey.
somewhere. Yeah, New Jersey. Just kind of or it was Seattle as well. We were talking about with just all the old defensemen. That's who it was.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so I think kind of the same situation with St. Louis. Just a lot of older defensemen. A lot of them are making a lot of money, and they're kind of locked up still. But Selyevs, I think, is going to take some time to kind of develop. So you can take your time with him. But kind of the same thing as Eisman. If he works out and you just have a 6'7" defenseman who can skate really well and has a booming shot and can defend okay, and that's fine. I don't see him as a Victor Hedman. I don't see him as a number one, number two defenseman. I think he's going to be like an okay 3 or 4. But I don't think I just don't see it. He's just such a weird player for me in this draft. He's so different. I think that's the problem. He's just like so much different than other defensemen and players we've seen. But I would be fine with taking him at this stage at this point. If he fell this far, I would be okay with it. I would understand it.
Yeah, I think with him, like if everything goes right, you're looking at a 6'7" monster who has a booming shot that you can play on the power play, who's not a negative in transition and can play penalty kill and stifle big defensive minutes in the defensive zone. We're talking 25 minutes a night with a lot of D zone start percentage, with a high D zone start percentage. But at the end of the day, like a lot of that is contingent on his processor turning around and being more assertive with the puck and not and being more comfortable with the puck on his stick. I think he's not super comfortable with that at this point in time. He makes a lot of blind passes. He gets rushed really easily. That leads to icings or turnovers. Um, I think his skating is really good. I think his gap control is a lot better than it was at the start of the year. But I don't quite think that offensive upside is there yet, and I think there is a chance that he just ends up as a Nikita Zadorov type, who's another big guy who skates well, who hits, but doesn't really do anything else really, really well. He's just a big body that can block shots and
Yeah.
hit.
The thing that makes
But I
Zadorov really valuable though is that he's really like he's so good defensively. He's a lot better defensively than Silayev is. I don't even like at this stage see like him being that physically dominant. Like Zadorov was a dominant physical defenseman. That's what made him drafted so high. And it's kind of around that like weird time, like the dead puck era, where like you still saw teams like drafting like really high defensive defensemen. Guys like if you remember Sam Moran, like he just went like top 10 for some
Oh
reason.
yeah, and played for
Um,
Canada the World Juniors too. I think.
yeah, I think so too. Yeah, that was when Canada was like not good at the World Juniors for a few
Yeah.
years. But so like I think with Zadorov, it's kind of it's worked out a lot better for Zadorov than it has for other players. Um, but I think that's just what makes him more valuable if you're going to compare the two. But I don't think Soleil has that same dominance really anywhere. I don't think he's a dominant defenseman. So
Yeah, but I think the upside is why I think he's gonna be a first round guy. I think he's
all right,
probably gonna be taken I think this is actually probably the lower end of where he gets taken, where we have him mocked right now, because I
yeah,
think there is a team that's gonna look at the tools, that's gonna look at the slap shot, the ability for him to close the gap defensively, and just like the league he's played in, and just take him based off of his traits over the body of work. But I think this is a pretty good spot. I think I would have taken him here too because I've been banging on the table since last year for St. Louis to draft a defenseman. We've
yeah.
got Scott Perunovich, who's not even looking like he's gonna be all that, and then nobody else on that pipeline defensively.
Michael Bushinger, who I don't mind,
Oh
but
yeah,
I don't think he's
Bushinger
going to be
played for Canada World
crazy.
Juniors. I forgot
Yeah,
about
yeah,
him.
yeah. He is like he's fine. He's a good OHL defenseman. I've liked him the last couple of years, but I mean, we'll see with him as well. I don't know if I see like total top four projection with him, but he's a good puck mover at least. So either they got him, but they have like kind of no one else. Like Silayev would be good for their pipeline. It would be if they develop him properly as well. So um 17, I'm gonna and oh the thing with Silayev as well that's weird is like he's ranked that high, but NHL scouts aren't even allowed to go to Russia to watch him. They can only watch video of him, and like if you're someone like us who's very limited to the video that we get, like
Yeah.
that's gonna be tough. That's maybe that's part of the reason why I just don't like. I mean, I just haven't watched them enough. I don't know. I just don't see what other people that have them ranked that high see. But anyways, 17. I'm gonna go with another Russian because they've dined out in Russia in the last bits. Nikita Romanov, and he's an awesome player. Like he produces well in the KHL already, and he just zips around the ice, stripping pucks. He's just putting constant pressure. It's kind of funny having back to back. They both play for the same team, but um, yeah, he's just been a. I feel like his tools are really projectable. Like his ability to really put pressure on. Um, I almost want to say Barbashev, but I don't think he's gonna like be as like offensive and as like clutch as
Yeah.
Barbashev has been, especially in the playoffs. But he's got that same like kind of grittiness. He's got that same, what's the word I'm looking for here? He's got the same like tenacity to go after players and to strip pucks away and to kind of create chances that way. He'll just throw the puck in the slot, kind of looking for a guy as well. He throws those like passes to the high danger areas, but they're not always like as calculated. But he does really try to make scoring chances happen. I think kind of in the same mold as a Brandzik Nygaard, he's probably going to be a good middle six guy one day, I would think. But even if he's like a third line guy, if that's his peak, like he's got so much energy to his game. He's just constantly moving, and I love that about a player. There's players where like sometimes it'll be a bit of a detriment, but because they're just kind of like skating around without like a purpose and like whatever, but like kind of like a figure skater. But he's not that at all. He's absolutely engaged in the game, and for Washington, again, that's just a team that's dined out in Russia. They've gotten some really high end guys in the past that I've really liked, and guys like Miroshnichenko, who's fallen, Lapierre, who fell, and they've looked okay for right now. Especially Lapierre, he's had a pretty good like last few games. So
Yeah,
hopefully,
McMichaels look good for them too.
yeah, exactly. So you're just kind of building around that young forward core. They have some like decently young defensemen still. Like Sandin is like only 24, Fairbury's 24,
Vincent
Alexia.
Iorio, this
Yeah,
guy I
he's there
like.
too. Yeah, he's good as well. So um, yeah, just another young forward to
Alexia
bring
is
along.
playing for them. I think he's 24, 25. Martin
Yeah,
Feher-Varaghese,
exactly.
he's only like 24.
Yeah, and it'll be interesting if Washington makes the playoffs. I think if they don't make the playoffs, I could kind of see them trading down here and maybe get some extra picks because, like, you don't know at that point. Like, I feel like this is like one of the last years that they make the playoffs, so they're gonna do it comfortably. But we'll just make them pick at 17 here for now, and if they do, it's probably gonna be a guy like Artemonov. Even though I would definitely take him higher. He was in my top 10 at one point. But yeah,
All right, sounds good. You got the Philly pick too.
and I got the Philly pick. Oof. Okay. Philadelphia. What's a good fit for Philadelphia? They've drafted like last year's draft was phenomenal.
Oh,
Like
great.
Matvey Michkov. They get two of my guys, Oliver Blanc and Denver
Blanc
Barkey.
and Barkey.
Barkey just hit 100 points. Blanc is so reliable defensively. They just traded away Cutter Gauthier for another defenseman and Jamie Drysdale. Um, let's see, who have they taken in the past? I guess a lot of their picks have been like Hextall picks, so I don't really want to do a Hextall pick here. I will take with this pick. I'm going to take Beckett Seneca from the Oshawa Generals
I
here.
like that pick.
Yeah, a guy that is really well rounded. I had a bit of a problem with him at the start of the year because he wasn't very consistent. He was getting into a little bit of trouble with referees and being suspended and stuff like that. He just had a bit of a hot head, and I was kind of thinking of like Zachary Lureau at this point. But as the year kind of went on, as guys like Callan Ritchie came back and Oshawa became a really good team, Beckett Seneca is a really important part of that Oshawa team. I don't think they're the same without him, especially that line. Um, the consistency has really gotten better. I've really enjoyed watching him. High skilled guy, can kind of be a pesky player to play against as well. He's got a hard shot. Really prides himself physically and defensively. Um, I think this would be a good fit for Philly at this stage because of the culture. Um, but I could see like a Sasha Boisvert at this pick, honestly, just with the size and the speed and the shot that he has. You know, you're just kind of like it's kind of like a poor man's Cutter Gauthier at that point. But Beckett Seneca is kind of that same style of player. You know what I mean? He's a tough player to play against, and he's been like that for like since he's been in the OHL. He's been a really consistent OHLer since he's jumped in at 16. So this is a guy that can probably make a pretty seamless transition to the NHL one day. I have to imagine. Like he's just too talented not to.
Yeah, no, I agree. I really like Seneki. He's a definite first round talent for me. I think he's lower on my board, not because I view him like differently than you, because I think he's in that vein of Boisvert, Tarek Parashak, Tanner Howe. Like I think you also have him in that like late first round, like in that group of players. I think he's
Yeah.
just lower because I have more defensemen that I'm like bullishly high on that most of the draft community is not. And
Yeah.
he pushed everyone after them down a couple of slots. Like Lucas Fisher, for example, is like not in anybody's first round. Thomas Lavoie is not in anybody's first round. So Banasanki is like 28th for me, but he really is probably closer to like 25. Um, so I think he's a really nice player. Um, Definitely have no issues with Philly taking him. I think he really fits what they want. I think he works really hard too. And he's a better defensive player than he was at the start of the season. And like, I just think, again, like the skating is a little bit of a concern for him, which is probably why I'm a bit lower than usual than most people. But you know what? I think part of that is probably because he's huge and he grew a lot over the last year or two. But he's if he can put it all together, Philly's got a great player on their hands.
Oh yeah.
And you
And
have 19 as well.
and I have 19 as well. So Vegas. I could probably see them trading this pick down, but I don't know who would want to move up at this stage. Anaheim maybe, but like that's a division rival there as well. Nashville maybe. That's the play. Like, I mean, this draft order is going to be different than what it is in
I
draft
think
day, so we'll have to see.
Montreal is
But
a team that could trade out with Vegas.
that's you know what, that's true as well. Should we do it? All
I'm down. Let's do it.
right, let's do it.
All right, Montreal
Honestly,
trades up with Vegas. They're gonna give up some other picks, but I think there's probably a couple players that maybe Montreal really likes,
maybe they get like a Nicolas Waugh or something. Maybe they get like another defense or centerman like they did the 1 year. I don't know.
or like
Anyway,
there's like a defensive logjam. I think they were shopping. Who was it that they were shopping this year at the deadline before he got hurt?
Vegas.
No, Montreal, was it Jordan Harris?
Oh, maybe that might
Like
be it.
maybe you see a Jordan Harris with this pick going so they can move up a couple of slots and like a fourth or a fifth.
Yeah, that makes about the most sense. I think with Vegas, they've really kind of dined out from wherever they've drafted. They just kind of drafted like sort of the best guys available, and I think there's some skilled players that are going to go later here that they can probably just take and they'll be fine. So, and if they're
All
not,
right.
then they'll just trade them for guys like Noah Hannafin and whoever else, Thomas Ertl. So,
Oh,
all
Kent Hughes is now on the clock with Montreal at 19.
right, and Kent Hughes is going to take. Let's see here, who's available. Who's available? Montreal fans might kill me for this pick, but it's going to be Trevor Connolly. Um, Off ice aside, and we'll get to that. Um, Trevor Connolly is one of the most skilled players in this draft. I've really liked him since day one. Very creative player. Skating is up there as well as one of the better ones in the draft. He's a power play specialist. Just another scoring winger to add to your team, especially if they add Demidov and Connolly. Those are two very intriguing names they add to that. So they add to that forward core. Um, with Montreal as well. If that defense is coming, surprisingly, they could probably take a defenseman off the board if they were picking from where they were. But Trevor Connolly's fallen a lot, and you know what? He's just off ice aside. He's one of the more talented players. Just bottom line. Um, Now the whole off ice thing, because there's been some stories about him about like how he treated other players on the same team and stuff when he was like 14, 15 years old. And you know, I'm a big believer that you kind of deserve, a job like the NHL is something that it's not it's not a right, it's a privilege. And if he was the same kind of player, same attitude type thing, I could see some teams maybe not having him on his do not draft list, but um, I do also believe that people change in 4 or 5 years, right? So, all the stupid stuff I did as a kid. I mean, we did stupid shit as a kid. I know I definitely did, and I'm not exactly proud of it, but I 100% wouldn't do that now. And I look back on it, and I'm like, what was I doing, right? And Connolly seems remorseful. And that hasn't been like there's been like a mixed reaction in terms of like if he's been remorseful, if he hasn't been. I don't want Montreal's thinking it's another pick with a lot of like, kind of clouds around, the Logan Mayu pick and whatever. I just think talent aside, like I think this is gonna be an NHL player. I think he's gonna be,
A
if
really good
everything goes
one.
well, and a really good one, and he's gonna, probably play in that top six, probably play in the power play, be a really creative specialist that way, and he's gonna be dynamite when he goes to university. I forget what school he's playing for, but wherever he goes, he's going to be a good NCAA player. I think like Gabe Perreault, like he's dining out right now in Boston College. Like maybe not like the same power forward qualities. I mean, Gabe Perreault is a pretty dynamite scorer and the development program, but Connolly has that same sort of style to his game. He's a creative dynamo that can really change the game in the USHL. The USHL is kind of becoming a better league year by year, and it's a tough league to score in now. So um, Connolly can definitely project in the NHL, at least I think. And I've kind of felt that way since day one. But off ice aside, he's great, but we'll see. We'll see how far he falls. I'm sure he'll fall in the draft, but I think whatever team takes him is going to be happy with him. So, and again, boom or bust. That's what this is. So,
For sure. I think Chicago and LA are probably quite sad that Montreal hopped
probably.
them in the draft
Yeah.
draft order here because I
Oh,
think
especially Chicago. They love
yeah,
their.
I think Trevor Connolly would have been a great pick for them there. But I think a player that I'm gonna take that's kind of in the same vein as Trevor Connolly and another guy who I think they'd be quite happy here with their pick, Andrew Basha. bit of an
Hmm.
older player, but I think he's been a bit overlooked on that line with Kane Lindstrom. I think he's really come into his own since Lindstrom's gone down with injury. I think he's a really dynamic offensive player, and he's like Connolly, a great playmaker. I think he plays with great speed. I think he gains entries very well. I think he's a guy that, we talk about how Chicago this year has really suffered with play driving and offensive creation. I think Andrew Basha, after you take Zane Prek in the first with the second pick, is a really good value pick here at 20 because I think he's a guy who could play with a guy like Bedard and take some of that offensive creation pressure off of him on his wing, right? As a guy who can handle the puck, can play drive, can has the speed as well to kind of shift defenders off balance. And if he can improve his shot a little bit and increase his commitment and work rate defensively, I think there's a really really good player here. But I think if you're Chicago, he's a pretty good consolation prize to Trevor Connolly because I think they are quite similar stylistically.
Yeah, and Basha's really stepped up since Lindstrom's been injured as well. And Basha reminds me a lot of Connor Zary, like just all around the
Mm.
table. Older player, skilled, smart player, can really drive his line as well. And Zary's playing pretty well in Calgary right now as well. So it took a couple years extra than I thought it was gonna, but Basha would be a good pick at this stage as well. I wouldn't mind that at all for Chicago. Just another skilled forward to add to their core.
No, for
Um,
sure.
as for Los Angeles, there's some names they could take here. So I'm not really prepared for this pick. Let me look at their depth chart here. I have a couple players in mind here. They like their skilled forwards and they like drafting defense. They've drafted a
Yeah.
lot of defensemen, um, and they have a pretty good defense core already. From by the looks of things, guys like Brant Clark, who I think should still be in the NHL, and he's not.
Jordan
Like
Spence is
Mikey,
great.
Jordan Spence, Mikey Anderson. Who knows what happens with him if they trade him, if they sign him? I think they did sign him, but I
They
can't
did. I
remember.
think Matt Raw
They
is the
did.
guy who might
Matt
make a
Roy.
free
That's
agency.
yeah, that's what I'm thinking of. Yeah, but they have a lot of skilled forwards. I'm gonna go slightly off the board here. I'm gonna take Alphonse Fry with this pick.
I like that pick.
Um,
That's who I would have picked.
yeah, and they took a guy like Tobias Bjornfoot, and he hasn't really quite worked out well. I don't think he's even on LA anymore. I can't remember, but
He got claimed off waivers by Vegas, I think.
that's correct. Yes, but Fry is he's a really interesting case, and he's kind of been steadily rising and rising throughout the year. And he's in my first round now. I think the difference between it's not a very good year for Sweden, and I think the difference between him and a lot of the defensemen kind of lower that are probably going to go lower in the first round or second round or whatever is he's just got this poise about him. He's a very complete defenseman. He's a strong defenseman for the size that he is. And he's been playing well in the Swedish Junior League this year as well. Just a real poised defenseman. Not like a high ceiling, but a high floor for sure. Like he's definitely a very intriguing option in that back end, especially as a left-hand shot as well. And 14 goals already this year in the regular season. So the player just kind of came out of nowhere, but a very intriguing option. And I can definitely see a team like LA jumping up and take him.
Yeah, no, for sure, for sure. Um, this is a tough spot because with my Nashville pick, I've had like a lot of mock drafts I've been doing on my own just for fun, and
Mm-hmm.
Alphonse Frey is always who I've had going at 22. So him going off the board here
Spoiler.
is a bit tough for me. Um, I think when you're playing in the Central with as many great defensemen, as great offensive players that there is, man, this is also, I think, a pretty off the board pick for most people. But as a guy I've really liked, he really impressed me at the World Juniors. And I've been watching him more and more. He's 6'6". I got Jesse Polkinen from JYP of the Liga here at 22nd to Nashville. I think he's super composed. I think he's shown some offensive creation in at the World Juniors and in the Liga. I think he projects as a second pair guy with with maybe power play two possibility. I think he's a guy who's really good with the puck on his stick, and I think there are some habits that he needs to tune out a little bit. Um, and he's like really calm with the puck on his stick, and he is sometimes prone to giveaways because of that. But like, I just think he's a really, really good player. He's my 26th ranked player. I think Nashville has a couple of Finns that they've drafted in the past. I think Svechkov, Kamel, and they've done really good job in the past developing defensemen. And I think Polkinen is a really good player. I don't feel great about it because it does feel a little bit high. I feel like I was kind of going out on a limb to take him to put him even ranked 26th, but this is kind of like my reach pick. You know, like the one where we talked about that, like most people don't have in their atop their boards. Like
Mm-hmm.
he's kind of like my reach pick, and I think I think he could be good for Nashville.
Yeah, I mean, if there's a team that'll make it work, it'll be Nashville. Just historically, that the defenseman that they've drafted is just insane. And if it doesn't work, they just trade him for a forward. So the Seth Jones, Johansson type thing, right? So, um, my thing with Polkin is just the age, and compared to where he
Yeah,
was, let's go a couple years ago, he's just kind of come out of nowhere. But I don't know. The thing is with like junior leagues and stuff, when they're 20 years old and it's a U20 league, you just kind of expect that. Um, so like he's played well in the men's league. I mean, if he's like a Jan Moser, and I compare him because he's the most recent example I can think of, and that's a good pick for Nashville, and that totally makes sense. I mean, Moser probably goes in the first round of a redraft at this point. Um, but those players are so like off the wall sometimes. Like they get drafted, but they either don't really do much or they like make it, and it's a very like wild player you're dealing with. But um, so it's a mix of that, and it's just a mix of like the other defensemen and players that are ahead of them that are younger that have maybe a little more upside that I've seen. I just also haven't seen a ton of Polkinen. I want to like him and I want to rate him higher because I want to see what other people are seeing, but I don't see it right now. So,
that's definitely fair. I'm at 23 with Toronto, and I'm wondering, Nick, if there is any team that you have that might be interested in moving up here to
hmm,
23.
I guess
It's Toronto tried to trade down last year to take
I
Easton
guess it
Talent.
depends on who has a lot of picks. The only team I can really think of that would have a lot of picks would be like Ottawa or Philly, but I don't know if they trade with any of those teams, but I don't know. I mean, they traded with Philly the 1 year, I think,
It
like 10
might,
years ago.
yeah. Let me know if you're interested. I think Calgary could also be a team that trades up if they have a player
That's
they really
true.
like.
I know they did kind of load up on some draft picks, but I don't know if they were very high draft picks. Give me a sec here. Do. Yeah, you know what? Calgary does have a ton of draft picks, but they're all conditional picks too, so you don't even really quite
Oh,
know
so you
where
can't
that's.
really move them like that.
No, no, no. I'll try to move quick here. What's Philly got? Philly has Philly has some picks. They have an Anaheim second rounder next year. Carolina, that's probably gonna be a low pick. That's a fifth rounder. Moving up in the first round, you probably want like a third and something. But they don't really have too much. They have like another second, but it's also conditional. Okay, and then let's go to what was it? We said Ottawa. Ottawa probably has a ton of picks. To be fair, they might be willing to do it as well. Here, where are they? Come on, Ottawa, I'm on the clock. There we go. Oh, yeah, Ottawa has a ton of picks. They have a Florida third for next year, and they also have a ton of forwards for this year.
I think
They've
I think
got
I would take a third to move. How many spots am I moving at? 5 spots. I do a third and a conditional fourth to move down to
mm,
28.
you could probably take like both of Florida's picks then, because Florida's fourth rounder this year is a good condition. They have Florida's third rounder next year.
Okay, so I'll just take the Florida
So
pick.
why don't you just do that? Let's just do that just to make it easier.
Okay, I'll type it up after, but
Cool. All right.
And do you have Ottawa? I think you're in charge of Ottawa.
I do have
Or
Ottawa.
oh no, I
Yes,
have
you are
Ottawa.
correct. You are
I have
correct.
Ottawa, right? Yeah.
Oh, you have Ottawa.
Yeah, I have
Yes, you
Ottawa.
do. Sorry. Yes, yes, you do
Okay,
have
okay.
Ottawa. I
So
thought I had
okay,
Ottawa.
I guess you were just the opposite GM for the sake of making this trade.
Yeah,
Ottawa
I guess so.
coming up here. Um, I could really see a left-handed D here, or like a right D here. I really like Dominic Badinka. He's
Yeah,
another
he's good.
he's another slightly older player, but I really like him. He's my 23rd ranked player. I think they might not bring Brandstrom back in free agency, even though he's an RFA. But I think Badinka is playing in the men's league. Pretty. The production is not quite there, but I think he's really composed, really great skater, really good breakout. Um, I think he's aggressive with his defending. He's just a really top. Like I feel like he's almost a lock to be a top four defenseman. Like he's one of those guys that I've had like a bit of a crush on over the last couple of weeks. The more I've watched them, and I think if you're gonna go Kane Lindstrom at 6, you look at the blue liners available here. I think Badinka is probably my favorite of the remaining guys that I think within reason because I really like Thomas Lavoie and Lucas Fisher. I don't think Ottawa's taking them at 23. I think Badinka's a guy who could realistically sneak into the later first round, and he's one of my favorite players. And so I think this is worth a bit of a trade up here.
Yeah, he's really good. He's like really mobile for like a shutdown guy. Like he can
Yeah,
create offense. He's getting more and more confident with the puck, which is that's something you like to see throughout the year, right? You like to see guys progress. And Padenka's definitely progressing throughout the year, and he's playing in the SHL this year, and he's played well. So he's really stood out. For Anaheim, they took Artem Levshinov, a defenseman. They definitely go forward here, I think. I'm going to go with Sasha Boisvert from the Muskegon Lumberjacks, and um, he's a player that I think is going to take a little bit of time. He's still a little bit raw, but um, kind of in the same mold as what Anaheim's drafted the last few years, a big centerman. I say big, he's not like huge, but kind of I guess in a similar role as Mason McTavish, just a shooting first centerman who can really skate. He's not like as two-way dominant as a McTavish. He's not even really like as dominant offensively as McTavish is. I think he's going to take a little bit of time, but the finishing is there. He reminds me a little bit of Dylan Strome in a sense, where it kind of has those same attributes. So I would definitely go Boisvert with this pick. I mean, there's some good forwards we're leaving on the table here. There's a lot of like really skilled forwards in this draft. Um,
yeah,
but Boisvert for me just kind of makes the most sense when you look at all the prospects they have and kind of the team they're building there. You know, another big team. They kind of built the same way for the last like 20 years since they had like Getzlaff and Perry, right? So just kind of the same identity. And I feel like Pat Verbeek kind of likes his bigger forwards. And Boisvert's having a good year in Muskegon as well. I have USHL players ranked higher, but I think it makes the most sense here.
yeah. I'm a huge fan of Boisvert. He's been a lock in the first round for me, for a little bit now. So I can definitely see that pick. I like that a lot. I think Michael Hodge is one of the players you have higher than him, right? But
Yeah, I really like Hage. Like we'll get to him. I don't know if he's going to be even picked in the first round, but um, maybe like an early second. We'll see. But Hay just he had a tough year last year. He got injured for most of it, and he's come back and he's bounced back on a USHL team that's really good at developing talent. It seems like every Canadian player wants to go there now. Um, and he's been just on a tear lately. He's been really good, kind of showing why he was as highly touted as he was coming out of the OHL draft and stuff. So, um, anyways, with that being said, going to 25. Again, there's some skilled players here still available. I think I'll take Tarek Parasak here from Prince George. Playing on a real good team, 100 points as a rookie this year. Um, he's just a really skilled, really smart player. He just gets to the right areas, even if he's not like the best skater. It might need a little bit of work, but he's I think fast enough in his first step where his control entries are really good. He's able to control the pace of play fairly well, and I mean, there's a reason why he's got 100 points, and I don't think it's that he's playing on a good team. I think he's just able to create offense, and drive the net really hard and just be skilled enough to create plays and score goals. I mean, he's a dominant offensive presence. He's going to go back to the WHL and probably be dominant. I mean, he plays with high end guys like Riley Height and stuff. And I think he could be Riley Height once Riley Height goes, so he's going to be a big time junior scorer. Might take a little bit at the next level, but I think the ceiling and the floor is there for sure for a guy like Parasek, especially this late in the draft. He's just one of the smartest players in this draft, bar none as well. So,
No, for sure. I like Tarek Parasak as well. He's also definitely a first round forward for me. And my rankings don't have a ton of forwards in the first round. Not from like a talent perspective, just like the top 32 players for me have more defense than forwards. But he's been super productive for Prince George. I've really liked what I've seen from him this year. I think he is a little bit how do I put this? Chaotic sometimes, but it's like a good chaos. He creates a lot of chaos. I think he's he's not dynamic per se, but I think at this point in the draft, he's gonna be a really good potential middle six player. Um, and I think he plays the game the right way. He works hard, and I think he's gonna be a real asset for Vegas for as a team that values that. And I think from where they traded down from 19, I think they got a really good player. I think there's some people who wouldn't have been upset with Parasak at 20 or 21 even.
and
So I
again,
think this
it feels like Vegas just takes the best player available in like every draft that they've been in. So I feel like at this point it's probably Parasek. I'm just looking at some of the other names on the board in terms of like what holes they have and what they don't have. So um, yeah, that's basically it.
with Dallas, which is another team that has drafted so well
Mm-hmm.
over the last couple of years. I'm gonna go for a bit of a reach here, but this guy is one of my guys, and a guy that I'm looking for a reason to get in the first round, and that's Teddy Stiga of the USN DTP development program. Um, I just think he's a really versatile player. I think he's great. He's got great feet. He's got great hockey IQ, and I think he's a potential play driver. And I think he's this. He's not the biggest guy, but I think he plays with strength, with power, and he's got great skating. And I think that with the shortage at this point of playmaking play drivers available, because I don't think there's a lot of those guys left. I think Teddy Stiga is a guy who could sneak into the late first round, and I think he's a guy that would play really well um, on Dallas. And I don't remember who he's committed to, but I think it's a really good program. And I think he can continue to grow. And he's been pretty productive this year. He's got 32 and 23 games for the USNTDP. So, this is my guy. I love him as a player. He's a guy that I'm going to continue to look to move up my draft board however I can. But yeah, this is I think if Dallas took him here, that's another great player that they're getting.
Yeah, I could see that. I didn't mind Sega. I just didn't really see a lot of them up until like the Five Nations, and I think he had like the most productive tournament out of anybody there. So, um, in terms of the Americans, anyways, they lost in the gold medal game that round. But um, you're right. He's very versatile. He moves around really well. Um, I could definitely see him sneaking in the first round. I have him ranked a little lower just because there's some players, especially in the same league, I kind of like ahead of him. Guys like Camille Bednarik. Um, I think I have rated higher than him. If I can remember, um,
There's a
but
couple
yeah,
of great players from the USHL this year.
yeah. There's some good like
John Mustard's really good too.
yeah him as well. Yeah,
There's a couple of great ones. Carolina here at 27, and I know you're not. I think we're both not as high on him as consensus is. I have him fringe first round. I think you have him solidly in the middle of the second round. But I think with Carolina, they've always taken guys that people value but have fallen off the board, who fall down the board. And I think Adam Yurachek, the skating, the potential, the upside, I think Carolina would really value that. I think he's got more than what he's shown, but I can't justify taking him higher because he hasn't quite shown it. The development has been a little bit stunted, but I think the raw tools are there. And I think the skating, the edge work, and his ability to play in a pro league, he plays pretty physical too. He's I think there's something there. I think there's some offensive upside there that we haven't seen yet playing in the men's league. And there are a lot of great Czech players this year. And I think Juracek is made the World Juniors. He got injured really early on, but I do like him a lot as a player, and I think certainly worthy still of at least being a late first round candidate.
I can see it. This is kind of a stage of the first round where like you kind of see the mix of the second round kind of sticking in, and maybe even some parts of the like early third round. It gets really weird at the end of the first round. Um, Yurchek's just a guy that I just can't really get a read on. Like I see some like the skating and the offensive attributes he has. He's kind of like his brother, but he's not like as he doesn't have the upside
Defined.
that his brother has, right? So, but I still firmly believe that he just kind of jumped into the pro league way too early. Like there's a lot of Czech guys that I have ranked in like the first three rounds that have played in the like in the pro league and have shown really well and that they should be in the pro league. And Juracek isn't one of those guys. So um, just with that, just comparing another players in that league, it's kind of hard to put him up anywhere. Based on talent alone, he should be a first round pick, but it's tough when he hasn't played much hockey, and when he has played, he hasn't been really the player that I was kind of hoping for, right? But I also see the same thing about guys like Simon Nemitz, who ended up just fine. He went second overall, so the draft is the draft. You live and you
Yeah,
learn.
for sure. Oh man, I still got two more picks in a row here. Okay. Oh boy, here with Toronto is a little bit tough because the guy I kind of shot myself in the foot because the guy I was trading back hoping I could pick is the guy I ended up picking with the pick I traded down with Dominic Badinka, because I think Badinka would have been a really good fit for Toronto. But then I thought about it because I was thinking of maybe going Jet Luchenko with Ottawa. But I switched my mind last minute, and now I'm in a bit of a tough spot. But I think here with Toronto, I think the big thing is getting a right hand defensive prospect that's not that's not Topi Niemela, because and William Villeneuve. I guess those are like the two guys currently in the Leafs prospect pool. Niemela is the only one that really projects to have an NHL future. I think Villeneuve tops out as maybe a Connor Timmins type, just a cup of coffee in the NHL. Can't really get consistent ice time. Um, but I think that a guy that I don't really think fits Toronto's drafting profile, which is why I'm hesitant to take him, because he's not super cerebral, and he doesn't have great hockey IQ, but he has all of the tools that you would want in a really confident transition playmaking offensive two-way defenseman. It's just that because the cerebral aspect of his game lags behind, and there's a little bit less confidence for him to activate into the offensive zone, um, that he's kind of really fallen from a guy who I think we both had in like the top 15 at the start of this process,
Mm-hmm.
has fallen into the late first, and that's Henry Muse of the Ottawa 67s here. I think we both have him still ranked in the first round, but he's a guy that's definitely been falling. I think his turnovers, his defensive zone play has been a bit of a mixed bag, and I think that if that with Toronto and their development staff being more like kind of talking to maybe the Ottawa 67's coaching staff and saying, hey, we want there to be more structure to his game. We want the defensive end of his game to grow and kind of cater a development plan towards that. I think he's a guy who could really develop into a strong two-way player with really strong passing and transitional skill ability, kind of like how Timothy Liljegren has developed for Toronto. But I think that's something that the Leafs will really value because we've seen this year in the past couple of years that outside Morgan Riley, the Leafs didn't really have other defensemen that could transition the puck. And Liljegren's taken that step up this year, and I think Henry Muse is someone with some development, with some refining, with some maybe some adjustments from a schematic perspective from his coaching staff that could turn into a really good player for the Leafs. And I think at 28 after trading down, I think it's pretty good value.
It is, and I still think he's one of the stronger like two-way defensemen in this draft in terms of puck moving. He's an elite skater. He's definitely a Toronto player, like almost like a Rasmus Sandin type um,
Mm-hmm.
that they drafted, and um, I think if he definitely works in his play away from the puck, I think the gap control. I think once he gets that under control, I think it could really unlock some potential there to be a number three, number four guy, like just a stable puck moving defenseman. He's not like a super daring defenseman either, but he's solid enough where he's a lock in my first round. I don't know. Like I would feel weird putting him outside the first round at this point, just because I've been so high on him all year. But Muse is definitely a guy that I've been solid on. Pretty much since his rookie year. He was dynamite as rookie year. He's been pretty good on an Ottawa team that hasn't been particularly strong either. He's been a standout for sure. I think it'd be a good pick for Toronto, to be fair. I mean, especially when you look at that right side. So,
Yeah, for sure. Now here with Colorado, and I think that's my last pick until my Calgary pick, and then you have
mhm.
the other two picks. I think with Colorado here, I'm really tempted to go blue line, but I don't feel like they need it. Um, and a guy that I've really grown on throughout the draft process, and a guy who I mentioned earlier, I think Jet Luchenko is a guy that could go in the first round.
Mhm.
He's a bit of a smaller player, but I think he plays a really high motor game. He's a good skater. I think he's got real defensive attributes, and he's been really productive this year for Guelph in the OHL. And kind of, I want to say, with what happened with Easton Cowan, I can kind of see happening to Jet Luchenko with a lower upside. I don't think Luchenko is ever going to be super toolsy in the sense of like the puck on his stick. I don't think he's ever going to be great in that aspect. I think he's more of an effort player. But I think with Colorado, having a guy like that that can move into your middle six or bottom six and be super high energy, high motor with some penalty killing ability and defensive acumen, would really fit what they're building in that bottom six really well. Like they signed Miles Wood to that deal. They got Ross Colton in that bottom six. They've got like a lot of grindy players with speed and high motor. And I think Jet Luchenko fits that really well. I think he's ranked lower for me, but he's a guy that I also really like, and I think has a really realistic shot of going in the first round.
Yeah, I like Ted Luchenko as well. He's a former junior knight, so I have a little bias for it there. But no, he's really skilled. He's really strong on the puck, and I remember watching him in Guelph last year and being really impressed by his play as a 16-year-old. So I'm kind of happy that people are jumping on that bandwagon now because I still like him. He's just inside my first round. He was just outside of it recently, so he's going to be kind of in and out of there, I think, as the draft approaches. But he's definitely a player I can see sneaking first round. I think it'd be a good pick for Colorado there as well. Just another energy guy that you can add, um, and another skill guy as well. Um, for Philadelphia, it's kind of tough at this stage. They are just kind of bulking up that prospect pool. They get a back at Seneca already, who is a really good player to add to that core. Um, I think they keep the forward train going. I'm going to go with Miguel Marquez with this pick here. And just a skilled, confident player on the puck. Tons of high danger chances that he creates, tons. And He's playing on a Lethbridge team where he's pretty much a standout on that team. I think he's I think he's an alternate captain of the team as well. I can't quite remember, but I have seen a few Lethbridge games, and I've been pretty impressed with what he's been able to bring to the table. He's a bit of a feisty player as well. Um, when he wants to be, he'll just yap at you. He'll be a bit of a pest. It's not really his style of game. He's more like the skill guy that likes to drive the net and again likes to create play in high danger zones. But I could totally see him being like a good like third liner, second line playmaking winger that can play on the power play and can give solid minutes to offensively. So um, I wouldn't mind the pick at all for Philadelphia. I think it makes sense. We again kind of the same as the Seneca pick, really. I just think Seneca has a lot more upside, has shown that this year. And Marquez, he's put up the points and he's shown the confidence, and I think I really like that with Philadelphia there.
Yeah, no, a couple of productive OHL forwards going off with the last couple of forward picks. Well, not even
Mm-hmm.
OHL, just CHL players with Parasek, with Seneki, Basha, the Luchenko, and now Marquez. With Calgary, unfortunately, I'm gonna have to kind of break up that trend of forwards we had going there for a second. And we talked about earlier how this team loves taking, like, apparently loves Russian defensemen now. And so I'm going to go and take my top Russian defenseman on the board. Not because I necessarily think that he's a first round talent. I think he's my 44th ranked player. But Matvey Shravin of the MHL, um, with Krasnaya Armia Moskva, hasn't really put up the numbers, but like we mentioned, he's 6'2", probably a more defensive minded defenseman. I think, he's got good gap control. I think he's got pretty good size. He's not a great offensive player, right? But like I said, clearly, Calgary values the defensive defenseman from Russia who can break up plays and um and not be a liability defensively. And if and he's still young. I think Shravin has a pretty late birthday, if I remember correctly.
I think you're right.
Okay, a March birthday, so not like a late birthday, but
Yeah,
it's not like he's an '05 guy where you have concerns. He's an older player, maybe he should be further along. He is still like relatively younger compared to the class. I think if he can improve his transition skills, just develop like a good first pass, I think he could be a positive transition player and it's not unlike some of the players that Calgary's already acquired in trades, but he's younger and he has more of a runway to become a player. Whereas with some of these guys, like Miramanov's already 26, Grushnikov's already 23, right? You get a bit more time with Shravin. Clearly they have an identity they want this team to mold into. Take Shravin, help him develop into who you want him to be, and he could be a really good player.
yeah, there is some value with those players, but there's a reason why those players also fall. It's that they're pretty easy to get in terms of like free agency. You really have to pick the right ones in terms of their energy and their defensive style. Shervin definitely brings a lot of energy. He just hasn't really played a ton this year. Um, but yeah, we'll see with him. I mean, I know with Grushnikov, I guess Dallas really liked him,
Yeah,
even though I wasn't a huge fan of him. But again, that's just the value that some of those defensive guys bring. You don't have to score a lot. You don't have to play a ton. As long as you're reliable defensively and you bring some type of aspect to a team, and that's kind of all you need, right? So I've seen Sherevin high in some rankings. I'm not quite as high on him. Um, there's some defensive players out there that I like a little more that bring a little more to the table, just kind of all around. But that's just my style of players that I like, right? So
right.
nothing against Shervin, but just not a player I've seen a ton of, and just a player that I feel like, I look at a guy like EJ Emery, and I look at the
Yeah,
athleticism, all the tools that he brings. If we're looking at defensive defensemen, but even like Lavoie, who I've started to kind of like, and Alec is ranked really low for
yes,
me, and they're
yes.
Lavoie is as well.
Join
So
me. Join me on the
I'm
Thomas
really,
Lavoie
believe me,
train.
I'm really trying. I've been quite a Harrison Brunicky guy as of late, but anyways, the last pick of the first round. When you look at the Rangers and what they've drafted in the past, they've drafted a lot of pesky players, annoying to play against, big players to play against. Um, then they kind of continue on that trend here. A little bit off the board if you like look at the second round. I'm gonna go with Matvei Gridin from Muskegon. I
Oh,
think at the point of recording, he's the highest scoring USHL player this season. Um, he's going to go to the University of Michigan, I believe, and that's a really good school, as we know. Tons of players playing there, and I mean, he's got the goal scoring pace, and 6'1". He's able to create play kind of fine. He's more like a finisher, but he's got those 39 assists to kind of boot with it as well. I don't know if he plays with Boisvert. I have to look into that a bit more, but like. Yeah, just
I think
a player
so.
that I could see the Rangers taking. I think so as well. It's hard to really
He's been
remember
more
to even like
productive than Boisvert this year. Boisvert
he
and
has
Gridin
been.
this
He's
year.
been more productive than Connolly, Boisvert. I'm a big Max Swanson guy. He's been more productive than him. Like he definitely brings a lot to the table in terms of forward core there for the Rangers and just kind of a style they like. I consider Cole Baudouin, but I think he's going to be more of a defensive centerman. I don't think he's going to be much of an offensive play driver. He really prides himself defensively, stripping pucks away and the like. I think the Rangers kind of like that mix of offensive ability and just defensive ability as well. And I think Gritting kind of brings both. And again, University of Michigan, I think he's going to dine out in the NCAA. There's just something about him that I like, and I can't pinpoint it just yet, but there's something there for sure.
Yeah, well, look at that. That concludes our official first mock draft of the season. We will be continuing to churn out more of these throughout the process. Um, Probably more so after I finish final exams this year and I actually have some more time at home and not just studying. But I think this was a really fun exercise, and I think the randomness that came into play is quite similar to how draft night unfolds. So if
It
you
definitely
guys like the
brings
video, yeah,
sorry,
yeah, go ahead.
it brings a different element because you rank these players and you're like, oh, there's no way that he goes higher than this guy. But when a draft, like I said, the draft is the draft, so it's tough to really project where anyone's going to go because everyone has their own lists, right? So it kind of just brings a
Exactly.
different element. Like there's some good players that we're leaving out here, so
Yeah, I mean,
um,
I think Thomas Gallup, Tanner Howard, I think is a guy we both had as like a consensus first round guy
yeah.
that didn't end up going. I think Emil Hemming is a guy you're really high on that I've kind of like fallen out of love with, but he was by most cases a consensus first rounder. Luke Misa is really good. Aaron Kiviharu, Maxime Masse, EJ Emery is
Mm-hmm.
another guy that a lot of people had first round hype on.
Ryder Ritchie is a lot in first round rankings. Ryder Ritchie.
Yeah, I think both of
Um,
us have him like middle second round though.
yeah, I'm just not totally sold on Ryder Ritchie just yet, but
Pretty
Cole
one-on-one
Hudson.
ability though.
Yeah, good one-on-one ability. Just not really as much of a game breaker as you'd like from like a first round pick, but at least in my opinion. That's Cole Hudson falling as well. Is he going to be a second round pick, or is just going to be dynamite like his brother? We'll have to wait and see for that one as well. That's yeah, no, it's fun.
Yeah, no, but if you guys enjoyed these kinds of videos, hit the like button, subscribe. We appreciate you guys, and we'll see you for the next one.